We have ourselves a job to do today. I'm going to try to recreate what I talked about yesterday about new culture, teach you all about an advanced form of NVC, and give you an experience of what your life is going to be like when you combine the two. And it gave me a little over an hour.
That's all.
So the good news is I have written a book. Just finished it this week. This is draft 3. Draft 5 is the final draft. What this has freed me to do is I no longer have to tell you everything I want you to know in an hour and a half. I'm only going to tell you enough to be an appetizer, and then you can get the book, and you can get the main course. This is not about new culture. This is about using NVC in intimate relationships, which is what I do. For those of you that don't know, I'm a marriage mediator. I was looking for a new career after computers got to be too much a young man's game, and I tried being a divorce mediator, but I couldn't understand if mediation worked so well to help couples who had given up on each other peacefully separate their life. Instead of calling the fire company after your house was burned down, why not call it sooner? And so I invented something called marriage mediation. And my wife and I worked together with that for a few years until she discovered she didn't actually like sitting in the room with people fighting. And she became an acupuncturist. 5 needles and they're asleep. So what I've come to understand is there are kind of, as the result of being part of Network for New Culture, there are kind of 3 levels at which we all need to do our work. The first is the internal level. And unfortunately, you have to do that work. I can't give you tools that'll get around the fact that whatever judgments you have about yourself, whatever unhealed wounds you have, you will project them out on your partner and your community and screw everything up. So the first level is you have to work on yourself. The second level, there are things you can't do by yourself, and those are the skills of relationship, healing the wounds of relationship and discovering the value of relationship. You need a partner or partners to do that, and so that's level 2. And that's kind of where I've made my science, is in the mediation of couples and polypods. And the third level, which New Culture taught me about, is community. There are things you can't do by yourself or even with your partners. You need to be in community because it stretches you to a whole another level. And as a mediator, what those 3 levels are about are 3 different levels of difference. Essentially, relationship is about difference, which is why mediation is the appropriate tool, not therapy, for doing this work. So the first difference is the difference between what your heart desires and what your ego believes. I call that the vertical or intrapsychic mediation, and sometimes I have to do that before I can do the work with a couple. If you're at war with yourself, 2 parts of yourself are at war with each other, that's going to just project out into your relationship. The second level...
Could you repeat that? The difference between your heart desire and your ego.
Your ego self, yeah. What your ego believes you're allowed. So I have developed a concept I call forbidden needs. At this level, we all have some desires that we believe we don't deserve. I'm not good enough, I'm not handsome enough. Humans just shouldn't have that, it's sinful, whatever. And your conscious mind can be programmed to believe any of that stuff. I said this at the intro. When I was a kid, my sister got a doll that if you turned it like this, it would make a little wah sound. And then the next generation, you could pull a string and it would say something. And then the next generation, there was a little button you could press and you could say anything you wanted. And then when you pulled the string, the doll said that. And human beings are that third kind. We are programmable. There's two ways to program a human being. One is just keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And eventually our unconscious believes, well, that must be true. Keep saying it. And what's important about understanding how that one works is it does not matter what the content is. It doesn't even have to make sense. It could be completely false. But if they just keep repeating it at you, you will believe it eventually. And this group is old enough. I'll do the same exercise. Finish the sentence. Winston tastes good like? Isn't that a shame? You are new culture people, and you have been programmed to say that stupid sentence, which, think about it for a second, how good should a cigarette taste? That company's been out of business for 50 years, and they did such a good job of programming you that the new culture community at large can say that. You probably can't remember a lot of the things that Kelly Bryson taught you, and yet you know what Winston had to say. We are programmable. The second way to program human beings is with intense feeling. You put somebody through a really intense experience that programs them to believe that's the way that's going to turn out. And if you really want to put a program in intensely, repeat it over and over again and have it be really intense experience. We're just programmable. And the thing I want you to take away from this is human beings can be programmed regardless of whether the program is in your best interest or even true. You need to get that. You are programmed. And so from my perspective, new culture is the process of rooting out those limiting belief programs that you don't even know you believe. Right? If I said to you, everybody in this room knows one commercial, you could doubt me until I did that thing. You didn't know you knew that until I activated that program. So what new culture does through its technologies and through the community of loving each other, we're rooting out those limiting beliefs. While you have those limiting beliefs, you are a limited being. There are things you will not be able to do. What's interesting about limiting beliefs is as soon as you contradict a limiting belief, you start to feel bad. Now, the contradiction to the limiting belief may be actually your own truth. It may be in your best interest. It may be what you really need. And yet, when you're in the presence of something that contradicts a limiting belief, you will feel bad, uncomfortable, and since the way most of us respond to our own discomfort is to get it the fuck off of us and project it out on the person who's nearest us, which will probably be your partner, life partner, or partners. And that's the way you will deal with doing something you should be doing, feeling bad about it, and then attacking your partner and your community as a result of the way that makes you feel. It's a terrible way to screw up a person and a community. And at the next level down, there are needs of yours, and I'm going to define needs in a moment. There are needs of yours which, as I said, you believe are forbidden to you, that you don't deserve them, you can't have them. And interestingly enough, when the situation stimulates one of those needs, you will feel really terrible. You will feel as though the situation itself is forbidding you again. And once again, you will be really uncomfortable and you will project that out onto the partner and partners that you're living with. And those two things are the source of all violence, according to nonviolent communication. So one of the practices that we do here and that I teach my clients and that you need to do even at the individual level is we need to learn to get comfortable with our uncomfortable feelings. Because if you just react to your uncomfortable feelings as though they are true and that there's something bad going on, you will miss the opportunities that are being presented right at the moment of healing. And what I believe about all conflict that takes place in couples is that the fights are happening, conflict is happening right at the moment where your relationship wants to take you to a deeper level of intimacy, where you're just about to get satisfaction in a thing that you've gone decades and decades of not getting satisfied. And because it brings up uncomfortable feelings in you, because you're so unfamiliar with it and because you believe it's forbidden, you will push your partner away and attack them, and they will attack back. And when couples come to see me, the most violent disputes that they're having, the ones that they say, if you don't fix this, we are getting a divorce, is their relationship on a precipice of intimacy and healing. And so the work that I do, and what you can read about in my book, is how to recognize that moment and what to do about turning around that precious moment. We waste so many of those healing moments. And 50% of marriages end in divorce. I believe probably the vast majority of them were right on the edge of the fulfillment of the thing that brought them together. It's from the perspective, I've been doing this for 15 years, watching this happen over and over again. It's a massive waste of love. It's a massive waste of time and of life. And we are so close to healing each other. It's my wish for all of us that we make this moment a moment where we start to turn that around. So I'm going to, this process of NVC, basically what NVC says, to make it very simple, is everything that you do and everything that you say is an attempt on your part to get a universal human need of yours satisfied. I've been watching this for 15 years, and I haven't seen an exception to that. Everything that you do, and everything that you and everyone says is an attempt to get a universal human need met. And the quality of universal needs they are life-affirming, they are always positive in their intention, and they are the source of all satisfaction in human life. What that means, if you take a moment to take this silly little sentence and think about it for a second, is it means that everything that's going on is an attempt to get beautiful needs met. That's all that's going on. And all this violence and all this confusion and all this dissatisfaction is just a misunderstanding of what's going on. Now, I didn't say that the way people express their beautiful needs makes it easy for them or us to tell what the need is or to connect to the beauty of it. In the process of translating that need into actions and words, we have free will to express them in all different kinds of ways. And so if a partner or a loved one or a member of your community says something that sounds violent or not life-affirming or negative in its intention, what you need to understand is they spoke it badly. And you should get curious about what the beautiful need is that's underneath that. And if you do, you take that precipice and you back off the precipice and drop down into intimacy. And that's my whole process. Now, the way that people often communicate their needs when they don't believe they can have that need, when it's what I call a forbidden or a hidden need, is they communicate it as a judgment, what Marshall Rosenberg, the NVC inventor, called a moral judgment, basically identifying the other person as bad or wrong. If you do that, the other person will experience violence. And they will respond not to the beautiful need, but to the form in which you communicate. My whole process is basically just teaching people how to express the beauty within them in a form that those of us on the outside who love them can understand. That's how you get rid of all the violence in the world. That's it. Now, if you were to do that, if you were to have what I call an embodied NVC relationship, you would never experience yourself being thought of as wrong or bad. Because you aren't. What you want to do may not meet my need, or the strategy you're picking may not work for me. But all you're doing is trying to get your beautiful need met. And so it's actually perfectly reasonable for you to be in a relationship for years and years and never experience your partner thinking of you as wrong or bad. Feel what that would feel like. You know, some people whose dogs have died, there's a kind of a rotting doghouse out in the backyard. Imagine if your relationship doghouse just went into misuse. It's just, no one goes in the doghouse anymore. That any time a need of either of yours is not being satisfied, you have a beautiful, gentle, what I call quiet, truthful conversation. Both of you connected to the belief and understanding that underneath whatever appears to be going on is just these beautiful needs. And that's my definition of compassion. Allowing yourself, against all evidence to the contrary in the surface, that all that's going on here is your beautiful partner has a beautiful need. And if they're asking it of you, it's very likely you're really good at meeting that need, because we tend to pick people who are good at meeting the needs we don't meet ourselves. And if you were to then extend that nonviolent relationship to a community, you would have my vision of what a new culture community is. It's a community of people who understand what's motivating all of us is beautiful and life-affirming, and that we would be there to support each other in the acquisition and manifestation of that beautiful energy. That's the goal of my work as it applies to nonviolent communication and new culture. Any questions about any of that? Yes?
Give me an example.
Sure. It's every first session I do with couples. So the one that's coming to mind, I can tell why, is a couple comes in, and when they met, he said, you know, I'm poly, and she said, well, I'm not, and he said, well, I love you, I'd like to be in a relationship with you, and she says, well, okay, but you have to agree to being mono, and he says, okay. And then a few weeks or months or years later, he realizes that he made an agreement. He said yes to something that was really a no. And Now they've been now, and then they go to war with each other over strategy, right? She wants to use monogamy as a way of getting her needs met. He wants to use polyamory as a way of getting his needs met, but they're just beautiful, universal human needs. And some of those couples can drop down into having that conversation, and there are over 100,000 people on the Yahoo Monopoly news group who are having that relationship, and some people can't have it. Or co-parenting. People come in, most of the fights couples have, they actually have the same need, but they just have different strategies for getting it met. So there's a strategy called mothering and a strategy called fathering. Not always the woman doing the mothering and the man doing the fathering. And to my definition, mothering is caring about the safety and the development inside of a really sense of self. And fathering is developing the relationship with the outside world and the willingness to take risk. And they have a fight over that as if each one of them is trying to kill the child. You're trying to suffocate the child, you're trying to kill our child. And actually they're both wanting their child to have one half of everything their child needs. And people get divorced over that fight, which is a really bad divorce because then they each do their thing in different households, and the kids end up not with a blend, but with two completely different ways of being raised.
So the limiting belief would be the right way to parent is to mother,
Right.
and then as that gets challenged, there's the pushback.
Yes, so you're trying to kill our kid. You let him actually climb on a monkey bars? Are you out of your mind? No, he was there with 8 other kids. I love being on monkey bars. Other questions? Yeah.
So if there's a relationship that's been going on for some time and there aren't any fights and there isn't any violent communication, I mean, is that a sign that the relationship is not moving forward?
Probably. I mean, it depends on the quality of the communication, but yeah, probably. I mean, a lot of couples come to me and he lives in the basement and she lives on the 3rd floor. And either sometimes they actually eat together and they're not moving forward because they bought into that these needs are forbidden and this is just the way it is. We just won't go any further. Now, as you know, here in New Culture, getting triggered, which means setting off a forbidden need in my parlance, happens all the time, and there's a fork in the road. I'm tempted to call my book, There's a Fork in Your Marriage, because there's a fork in the road every moment. And if you choose the fork that says, okay, that's it. Either we get divorced or we'll stay married, but I just give up on this. So I won't have sex for the rest of my life. So you do whatever you want with the kids. I'll just bring the money home. Or, you see these agreements that people make, and they basically just stop their forward motion. And in order to get that going again, they have to go over a big explosion of a hump.
Well, that segues to a follow-up I really want to ask, like, how can you, other than buying your book and reading it and finding out, how can you avoid that big explosion and hump that okay, this is no longer hypothetical, I'm talking about my own relationship here, and I'm worried that we aren't growing, so it's like, how can we remove that jam without getting any kind of blow up?
It's easy. It's a 3-step process. You identify what's true for you, you care about what's true for your partner, and you start having quiet, truthful conversations. But they have free will. Even if you decide that I'm willing to look at my truth at all cost, they may not. And there may be a blow-up as a result of that. One of the problems with my system is it takes a Herculean amount of self-responsibility, and only about 2 out of 10 couples are willing to go the whole gambit.
Would you help me with this? When I get triggered, I'll just say myself, and then I want to move to kind of being curious of what that person's need is. And then they kind of get on a rant because it's so historical, you know, it's so big. And
Well, that's not why. They get on a rant because you've triggered one of their uncomfortable feelings.
Right.
And I have a magic trick for that.
okay, good, tell me.
Judgments, according to Marshall, are tragic expressions of unmet needs. That's the way he said it. The way I said it is it's a badly worded request to get your need met. And the psyche, so you have this forbidden need. You know, say as I was growing up, this isn't true, but say that my parents were the kind of Christians who believe that any kind of touching is sinful. And of course I have the universal human need to be touched like all humans do. And so that becomes a forbidden need of mine. I ask and I ask and I ask, and the answer is always no, no, no. And eventually I just say, all right, I can't have this. And I candy coat it with a wrapping of despair, and I give up on it. I believe that also becomes the chooser of my spouse, right? So my conscious mind goes, all right, fuck it. I don't need touching. You know, computers are coming along. I'm smart. I'm a man. I don't need that stuff. I'll just I'll live this half of my life. Your unconscious, however, is not in on that deal. And as soon as you get interested in having a relationship, it goes, and you have this list of what she should look like. You know, she should be blonde and Jewish and have a PhD. And meanwhile, your unconscious is going, no, she should touch. She should love touching. And you go out into the world dating, and you keep going out with all these blonde Jewish PhDs, and eventually you run into somebody who can't keep their hands off you, and you marry them. And it's bliss. We call that NRE, new relationship energy, though they call it infatuation. It's bliss. Why would you ever want to be anywhere except with someone who is consistently meeting your needs that consistently went unmet for decades and decades? That's why that is so hot and heavy and so much fun. And then you ask them to move in. Like, why wouldn't you? Have the toucher be right close up, near your skin. Now you're living with somebody who's really different than you, and you don't have the skills for dealing with that. And when they stop meeting your needs, because life kind of intercedes, you now have a problem, because you've opened up this forbidden need, and once a need gets set off, it doesn't go away till it gets met. So you have to ask, but you can't ask. It's forbidden. You've got yourself in this terrible conundrum, and the psyche, being this amazing thing that it is, comes up with this conclusion. Ask for it, but say the opposite of what you mean. Right? So how many times have you heard somebody say, I never want to see you again? And you know that's not what they mean. That's the opposite of what they mean. And so the way I would ask my soon-to-be ex-spouse to be touched, this person who is hand-picked because she loves touching, this person who, if I said, you know, honey, I'm feeling a little touch-deprived, could we have a cuddle, would like leap on me, but I can't say that. It's forbidden inside of me. Limiting belief. So what I say instead is, when I first met you, you seemed like such a warm person, but you're really kind of a cold fish, aren't you?
That's going to get good results.
You know what results? He said that's going to get good results. And you know what result it gets? She says, who would want to touch you anyway?
Right, continues your story.
And that was what your parents said to you. And that's how you recreate your family of origin. Is by communicating your forbidden needs as judgments. And so the answer to the question is, when you speak to your partner and they go into a rant, listen to the content of their judgments. First of all, Marshall says, there is no information about you in a judgment. Right? It's not about you. It's about their parents. So duck the judgment, take a step in, and reverse the thing they said. That is the bizarro way we are doing relationship. Ask for the opposite of what you want in a really angry way, and then divorce the person if they don't give it to you. Most of the people in the old culture are using that as their marriage algorithm. And it's not succeeding. But it's really easy. Actually, the psyche is really tricky. So it's not always as, you're so cold. Obviously, what they're wanting is warmth. But there are some really tough judgments to turn around.
So
And
when you say to her, "You're so cold," then then she's going to say back to you, I see you wanting some touch.
I'm wondering,
I'm wondering if you're wanting some touch.
for some reason, people don't like to be told what they're feeling or needing.
Okay.
So you want to make it a feeling or needs guess. Preferably a feeling guess, because the best way to do this process is get them to identify the need. Because then they really own it. So I really care about you, and I'm hearing that you're not getting as much warmth as you desire, and I really want that for you. Am I getting that right? All I have to do is say yes.
What happens when you're trying to communicate with a partner and they're fixated on the strategy to get the need met rather than the need itself, and whereas you're very open to meeting the need, you're in disagreement with the strategy?
So strategies only exist to satisfy needs. The truth is, when we ask a question of someone, like, "You want to go out for pizza?" that's not actually a question about pizza, which we only speak some part of, is, I have a need for nourishment. The strategy of pizza would meet my need. And then the real question is, would that strategy satisfy a need of yours? That's really what you're asking. But if they offer a strategy, that's as much information as a judgment. What need of theirs does that strategy meet? They're not talking about you. They're talking about themselves. There's no information and judgment about you. So make a guess about what need that strategy might be meeting in them. So it's sounding like you don't want to go out to dinner right now. I'm wondering if you're feeling concerned about us getting our bills paid by the end of the month, or whatever your guess is. So don't take judgments personally. They're not about you. Right? You've heard that before. Don't take it personally. This is why. It's not about you. They're telling you about their needs. And when you show interest, or show that you're willing to show curiosity about another person's needs, you become their best friend, especially if they're in what I call an unresourced state. An unresourced state is when you have an unsatisfied need and you don't know that. You only know that you're really uncomfortable. But all of you now know that when somebody's really uncomfortable, they have an unsatisfied need. And that needs to become the focus of the conversation, because that's what's really going on. That's the point of this conversation. You need to understand what's really going on. If you start having a fight about strategies, which is, by the way, if you are fighting, you're fighting about strategies. Needs never conflict. They don't even refer to other people. They're just about you. So if you're in a conflict, you're talking about strategies. Drop down to the needs on both sides. Have a needs-based negotiation. Co-create a strategy that meets both parties' needs. That's a self-mediated relationship. Co-creating a strategy that meets both parties' needs. You can't do that until all the needs are out on the table. Get the needs out on the table. I don't care how long it takes. Don't go to strategy. Because if you mention a strategy that doesn't take your partner's needs into account, their ears are going to fall off, and they're going to go right back to the beginning of the argument. Because we exist to get our needs met. That's where our satisfaction is. So spend a little extra time on the need identification part of the process. And do it. I have a description in my book I call listening them down to silence. Okay, so is that what you want? Is that what you're needing? Yes. Is there anything else? Well, there is this. Keep listening until the answer to the question, is there anything else, is no. Now it's time to go to the next phase, strategy, but not until then. So I hand over here.
I find this judgment thing is really brilliant. When it works in
Exactly.
I need to be in a calmer environment around someone who's not moving and talking so fast. So they're not wrong for being that way.
That's right.
That's, and I have to find out what my need actually is rather than to make them wrong.
That's right. And Marshall says the most violent place in the world is inside our own heads. I had a friend who did a 10-day Vipassana retreat. On the 10th day, on the 9th hour, all these people chilled out, walking around, and the sensei says, anyone who's having a judgment right now, raise your hand, and like 80% of the people raise their hands. And those judgments, those internal judgments, exactly the same formula. If you have a judgment of someone else or yourself, turn it around, get to the need. That's where the satisfaction is. Yeah.
So I'm actually a couples therapist, so I pretty much agree with everything you're saying. And I'm just wondering about the strategy. When you start talking about needs, a lot of people I work with have pretty severe trauma histories.
Pretty severe what?
Trauma histories.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be trauma. It can be choice. I don't want to look at this. I just refuse to look at this. I can't look at this. I refuse to look at this. I choose not to. I have a thick red line. I will ask 3 or 4 times really carefully and compassionately what the need is, make suggestions, be there for them. If a person can't identify their own needs, they can't do this process, I send them to a therapist. I only do 6 sessions. It took me 40 hours to learn to be a mediator. The skills are not that hard. We're just not taught it in this culture. I'm not teaching people to be professional mediators. 9 hours, 6 1.5-hour sessions is all I need. And the truth is, I do it in 3 most of the time. And the rest of them are just practicing and kind of fine-tuning it. This is not a long process. But I'm also not willing to do many more than 6 sessions. It's just not fun for me. So if I'm willing to lead a horse to water, if they don't want to drink, I send them to therapists.
So you're giving them the tools to do the work on their own.
Yeah.
They're empowering them rather than making them dependent on you.
Yes. And the other piece is, if only one party is willing to do this, surprisingly, that often works.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're tangoing with your partner and you've spent the last 5 years saying, would you stop tangoing? If you stop tangoing, they can't tango with you. And that's what happens. It's not the relationship I would want because the other person just continues to judge and tell stories, but the person who knows this isn't caught under the weight of the stories anymore. They just get their own goodness. And like I said earlier, the benefit of doing this is discovering your own goodness, just getting to feel what it feels like to be inside your own goodness. So let's try that. So I'm going to do a guided imagery with you just to give you an embodied sense of what it is that we're talking about here. If you'd like. So you can close your eyes or soft focus them. I guess I want to start with this story. In 1994, I had chronic fatigue syndrome. It's an incurable disease, and I was sick for 9 months. And the doctor did the test. He said, you have it. We don't have a cure. Call us if you find one. And so I went searching inside of myself. How am I going to do this? And I found that there was a part of myself that was not sick. You know, when we say I have cancer or I have chronic fatigue, we think that like we're just sick. I'm sick, right? All of me. But it's not true. There's plenty of parts of you that are completely okay, that have never been touched by any of the experiences that happen to you in life, that are still connected to how perfect and beautiful you are, that they know that without reserve. I'm going to ask you to find that part of yourself. Find the part of yourself that wants to love, that does love, and that has never been hurt, as much as the situational realities have been imperfect. It may shine with some kind of light. It will have a feeling inside your body somewhere. Breathe into it and make it bigger. Breathe into it and make it as big as you can, and let it push out anything that isn't it. You don't need that other stuff. This is what you need. Touch the perfect lover inside of yourself. And notice how that part of you is limitless. Notice that that part of you knows that anyone willing to love you should. You deserve it. You may want to apologize to this part of you for putting it in the background or forgetting about it. Begin a powerful relationship with this part of you. Make this your primary relationship. Breathe into this part. Love it. Let this part love you. If I'm correct, this part of you has no idea that there is anything wrong with you. It can't imagine that. It does not believe that. If I'm right, this part of you is completely convinced that you deserve all the love there is, all the happiness, all the pleasure. And now imagine that another person in your life or in your little group has this same, I picture it as a silver kind of ball of light inside of them. And picture their matching ball so that you have these two in relationship to each other. And imagine that their ball of light, their perfect love, as it sees your perfect loving self, just falls in love. And imagine it making contact and connection in whatever way you experience it. Feel what it's like to love love and to be loved as love. And now picture balls of light all around this room and feel them all connected to each other. That is what new culture looks like down below the story. And feel what it feels like to have all of these other balls of love fall in love with you and you with them. And imagine living this way, day in and day out. It's your birthright. And now find a way to let go of everyone else's ball of light. Keep connection to it however you'd like. And find a way to put your ball of light away in such a way that you can get at it anytime. Easy access. You're going to need it a lot in this life. And as you're putting it away, promise it that you will continue to connect with this part of you and love this part of you and love from this part of you. And if you want to do the extra credit, have your ego join in on the agreement. It might sound something like, no matter how scary it gets, I won't forget that I am love. No matter how violently they communicate to me, I won't forget that they are love. And when you're ready, come back into the room and each person take a minute or two to share with your group what that experience was like. Interesting how quiet you all were through that. Very soft. That is the quality of nonviolent communication. I call it a quiet, truthful conversation. Couples come into me at war, and in a couple of weeks, after the story is gone, the conversations are quiet and soft. Why shouldn't they be? They love each other. And in some ways, this is an answer to your question about trauma also. I'm an NLP practitioner because I began to realize feelings and needs are not conscious things. They're in the unconscious, and I needed to learn how to deal with the unconscious. And where you put the attention, that grows. And so in my work, couples come in all pissed off at each other, and what I often say to them is, if you think all we're going to do here is solve this fight, you're using way too big a tool for way too small a problem. My goal in this 6 weeks is to get you the marriage you always wanted. To speak that into the war, it just blows their mind. And so the focus of my work is on the beauty of the need. I worked in the federal penitentiaries for 2 years, and in 2 hours, prisoners find themselves free during this process. None of this stuff is, what we say about NVC is it's simple but not easy. So when you do this in even just one-on-one relationship, there's a lot going on. The truth of my work, and I think all of our work, is if you're not connected to yourself, don't even bother complaining about other people. So a lot of, the need for connection is one of the big NVC needs, and people catch that really quickly because it seems like a double-edged thing, I can't connect with him. He won't let me, or whatever. And I have come to always ask the question, well, how connected were you to yourself? And when people look, they realize, oh, I wasn't. So when you feel disconnected, and this is good for the group, if you feel like you're an outsider, are you connected to yourself? Take the time and attention to connect deeply with yourself, because you can't really connect with other people if you're not connected to yourself. And if the outside world scares you or stuff goes on that gets you into your egoic thinking or whatever, putting your attention out there just keeps you disconnected from yourself. So the work keeps being going back in here and discovering what the truth is about yourself. And I am coming to like doing this work more and more at the energetic level, because it just short circuits the thoughts and the situational reality and goes right for the bigger, deeper truths. And truth is another definition of universal human need. It's just your truth, which is why they're never in conflict. Whatever your truth is, how could I be in conflict with that? That's your truth. And what New Culture taught me, beyond what NVC did. And I followed a parallel course to Kelly Bryson, who was a big NVC guy and found that New Culture added a whole bunch of really interesting information. And this is a big piece of that, being connected to yourself is the place where everything starts. You just keep going back because this is where your needs are and this is where your truth is. And then sharing that without shutting that off. So, back in the 70s in the men's movement, men used to just shake hands. And so the men's movement did this big thing and we started hugging each other. And very quickly, it became this full body handshake, just crashing in and zooming out, and nobody was connected, nobody experienced it. Relationship to yourself, to your spirit, to your heart, to your loved ones, and to your community is all of a piece. It's all the same. And eventually you end up connected to the total oneness. And it's my belief that one of the great things about having multiple levels is when a problem shows up at one level, you have a very small window to fix it there. Like, it's kind of like if you light a match, you have a small window as the match goes towards the bonfire waiting to be lit to blow it out. And if you don't catch it in that amount of time and it touches the paper and the bonfire catches, blowing on the bonfire isn't going to put it out. You need to go to a different level to then suck the energy out of that level so it suffocates the bonfire. And I guess this is another answer I have to the trauma issue, is that this is another thing I do. If the trauma is emotional, or if the upset is emotional, so switch to the spiritual level or the physical. That's why working out helps when you're depressed, because you're sucking energy, there's too much attention. And this is just about balance. We're just trying to create balance. So this is my life's work. I feel like my book is, it's like the culmination of my life's work. I had a great editor, and I feel like I got to actually say everything I've ever wanted to say. I never get to do that. So this is just the tiniest little bit of what 15 years of sitting in rooms with couples screaming at each other has taught me. And even so, to be able to share this with people who are working at the level that you folks are working at the level of limiting beliefs and creating community that pushes through those limits, that does relationship, that pushes through the definitions, the old cultural definitions of what's okay and what's not, and does personal work in the presence of 60 other adults without shame, does sex without shame. It's a privilege to share my work with a community of people that are making this kind of commitment. And it's a never-ending process, perhaps, but it's such fun to do it inside of community. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. If you're interested in getting my book, Draft 3 is available on my website for $5. It's still very rough, but it has all the information in it. It's only going to be there for another week or two because the final draft is going to go up, and I don't know what my editor will end up pricing it at, but you can just download the PDF by going to maxrivers.net. And thank you for sharing community and this time with me. Namaste.